Number one, dig the well before you're thirsty. Have a way to reach out to people who are prospective investors before you need money from them, so that they understand what you're doing, so that they see some of your successes, so that they see some of your failures too. And here's why it's critical to share failures, because you want to share how you worked through the failure.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Lessons into Blessings podcast. I'm your host, Tari Thomas, and we have with us a friend of mine, somebody that's in the real estate game, multifamily game, alongside me and in different spaces. I glean a lot from him. He is a former founder of a tech company that he was in for over 2 decades before selling it off and starting Bridgetown Partners, which is a commercial syndication company that looks at properties from 50 to 100 units in Texas, Tennessee, Arizona. He's all over the place, but I love him. So help me introduce Ray Hightower.
Thank you.
What's up, Ray?
Thank you for having me, Tari. I'm so glad to see you here. I like your energy. I always enjoy your energy.
And what's kind of funny, I'm going to be transparent to the people that listen in. You're on the road looking for deals right now. That just tells you, he's like, look, I got to fit this podcast in, but got to get business done as well, which I love it.
Yeah. For the listeners, I'm at a property, just did a walkthrough a few minutes ago before I got on this call. And Tari saw my background and said, you better put up a virtual background. So I got a virtual background, but behind me is a property that I just walked through, and I'm walking through a few more here today because,
that's awesome.
We
you
money never
constantly
sleeps.
be looking. It's a numbers game.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about that because you have kind of a engineering technology background similar to myself. I'd love to hear kind of your transition and how you even got started down the path of real estate.
Got it. It's important to share, and I don't know if I've shared this with you in our other discussions. I've bounced between real estate and technology for decades, really.
Okay.
I have a computer science degree. I worked in corporate America for a couple of Fortune 500 companies, always in the technology role. I left one of those when I was in my mid-20s to go into commercial real estate. I was a commercial real estate broker for about 5 years. And I didn't do well as a broker, but I got the bug. I did the exams really well. I did all of the underwriting and anything that had anything to do with numbers or analysis. I did really well. And I closed some deals. I closed some vacant land, restaurants, apartment buildings, industrial property, retail property, that kind of stuff. I closed some, but it was a real challenge. And so I went back into technology. Right at the end of that, my first real estate career, I started my technology company, and that took off immediately. So I stuck with that. And that was, as you said, that was for a couple of decades. But all during that time, I always wanted to keep my toes in, keep my fingers in real estate for the same reason that you do. And we've talked about this before: capital preservation, tax advantages, and return on investment.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've always been in touch with it. And so, I've had a few people who only knew me on the technology said, hey, how'd you happen to do real estate? I said, well, I never really left real estate completely. And so I'm back more aggressively. I sold the technology company. I was fortunate to do an exit there. And, using that money, I was able to come into multifamily real estate, where you and I are in. You and I know a whole lot of the same people,
right?
And we have a lot of the same mentors and friends and partners and all of that stuff that we collaborate with, collaborators, all of that. So a lot about that. But I never really left real estate. And even now that I'm focused on real estate, I have not left technology. There's some technology ideas that I have for the commercial real estate space that we will carry out.
I love that. We're going to tap on that a little bit too.
Yes.
When you were a commercial broker to now, what are the things? Because it's like two entrances, right? It's like enter, exit. This avenue or this spin. What's changed from then to now that you know more about yourself? That diving in, you can do it better, more clear, more, you get what I mean?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And the way I would sum it up, there's something my brother likes to say, when we talk about, or when he talks about my last venture into commercial real estate, that was back in the late 80s, early 90s. He says that's the kind of experience you wouldn't trade it for $1 million, but you wouldn't repeat it again for two. My
That's
brother's really wise, right? And it was good. And you know what I learned from that, as a result of going through that, I learned negotiation, I learned contracts, I learned business through the School of Hard Knocks. So when I went into my technology company, there was a lot of stuff I was able to do that I would not have known had I not been a commercial real estate broker.
that's
For
good.
example, there was a client that we were negotiating with, a Fortune 500 company that was going to hire us for something, and we were in the middle of negotiations. And this middle manager at this Fortune 500 company, if I say the name, you will know them. I mean, they're
Yeah.
like a Fortune 100 company, or Fortune 50 company. Actually, they still exist today. This middle manager was trying to negotiate with me about something. And, it was hilarious because I had been a commercial real estate broker. What is this middle corporate manager going to do? So, the strategy I employed worked, and, we got paid and did really well. And that was a very critical point of the growth of our technology company. So each field informs the other. And you go through that too. Certainly, you have a tech background and a real estate background. And so you've seen a lot of that from both sides. You see that.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you believe is your greatest thing that you've been able to pivot from kind of the technology and being in entrepreneurship? What do you think is the biggest thing you've been able to apply, skill set that you've been able to apply and use to really gain fuel where you are now within the multifamily space?
Oh, wow. You know what? It really comes down to something that transcends all business, whether it's technology or real estate or healthcare or automotive or anything, making, tiddlywinks games or anything like that. One thing that transcends all business is how to work effectively with people, how
That's real.
to build a team, how to collaborate with a team, how to be very honest with your team members when something isn't working out. And on the flip side, how to listen to their feedback if I'm not doing something that's working out.
Yeah.
So it's the people skills that it transcends all business, all
Yeah.
business. You have to
Yeah.
have the knowledge of the industry, whatever industry you're in, but the people skills transcends everything.
Well, here's the funny thing about being just in engineering, and I learned this early on in the game, right? We study processes and systems and ones and zeros and how to code, and all that can go seamlessly well based upon how skilled we are. But the
Yes.
one factor that disrupts all of that is the people.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So, they cause the delays, the lags, how if it, and so it's absolutely correct. It's also, as a project manager, launching, very large multi-million dollar deals to market. It was like if you don't figure out how to bring all of these people together who have all of these different motivators, who have different, just, you've got to be able to figure out, how do I get everyone on the same page to lead the ship forward? And
Yes.
so, yeah, that's definitely a critical thing that needs to happen.
Yes.
Now, I believe you're like a phenomenal relationship guy. So I think that is a superpower that you have. Would you agree with that? How have you been able to use just your knack for people, working with people, being able to figure out, and just create relationships in this space? How has that really fueled you operating in this space, especially as a capital raiser?
Yeah. Um, well, you just said I was phenomenal, so of course I'm going to absorb that. I'm not going to argue with you.
It's not going to come every day, but yeah, you got to throw some. I'm just making jokes.
I won't argue with you. No, that's all of us need some ego food, right? All of us need
Yes,
that.
for sure.
You know what? where it really comes down to is, relationships are very much, and, one of my scouts asked me about this. I'm very active with the Boy Scouts of America, as you know. One of my scouts, a guy, he's about 14, 15 years old. And this particular guy is a gifted artist. And he also wants to hone his business skills so that he can make money from his art. And he asked me, what would you say you have to do to be successful in business? And I said, number one thing, I thought about it for a moment because I didn't want to just give him an off the cuff answer, but really the number one thing is integrity. And I'd say integrity in this sense. I think integrity is critical to any relationship. You mentioned
Absolutely.
relationship building and people skills and all of those. Integrity in this respect, when you say you're going to do something, go through and do it. Follow through and
Yeah,
do it.
for sure.
It is, and it's easy to say that. You and I, we can say that in one sentence, but the follow through, oh, it can be hard sometimes, especially, here's one, if you've made promises to two different people or two different sets of people, and it happens that those promises are conflicting. And no matter what you do, you're going to let somebody down. That is hard.
Yeah.
And, what I shared with him is, if you're in a situation where you're not going to be able to deliver, as soon as you know that you can't deliver, you need to get on the phone or communicate with the person that you're not going to deliver to or deliver with, and communicate with them. Tell them, hey, this is what's going on, and these are the steps I'm taking to fix the problem.
Yeah.
But you got to do that as soon as you can. There's I'm going to quote my brother again. My brother likes to say, bad news does not get better with time.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think also as an entrepreneur, and I mean, entrepreneur, real estate investor, it's kind of coincides, right? You have to be, there's always going to be things that go wrong, and you have to be flexible enough to be able to like make quick decisions and figure out how do I pivot? Am I
Yes.
flexible to solve problems in this space so that I can keep my promises as best as possible, right? So that I
Yes.
can keep as much, really keeping your investors in mind. Do you have any situations where you've had to navigate just being flexible, or what is something that our listeners can take away about just the knack of being flexible, and how you maybe have had to navigate that in certain real estate situations? There's no deal that I've done that something didn't come up
Oh,
that
there's
was like,
always something that
oh
comes up.
yeah, this could,
Yeah, there's always something that comes up. It could be anything from, there's repairs that we need to make that we weren't anticipating. There's, one of our properties in Phoenix, we had budgeted, I don't know, $50,000 for roof repairs. And then the roofers dig down, and they get down to the decking and to the plywood. Oh, there's some other things that need to be repaired, and it's going to cost another $11,000. Well, that carries through to what, the distributions we're going to send to our investors. And what we try to do is, like what I said to that scout, is we send a newsletter for every one of our properties, every property where I'm a GP, where I'm a general partner. We send a newsletter to our investors saying, hey, here's what happened in the last month. Here's how much money we made. Here's how much money we spent. Here's some gotchas that came out that we weren't expecting. And we also share the good news as well, because we don't want it to all be doom and gloom or whatever. But
right,
we share the good
absolutely.
news and the bad news. We share everything, so it's all balanced out. And the idea is, we want them to be very accustomed to hearing from us. And when we do that, it raises their confidence so that they want to invest with us in future deals.
For sure.
And we're fortunate that people, come back to us. It's, I grew my technology company because we had repeat clients. As you know, that's the only way to grow a business. You could get that first client, but it's really the repeat clients that enable you to grow
Absolutely.
your business exponentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talking about some of the things, the gotchas that come up, uh, and I'm going to use an example because there's a
Yes.
property that I'm working on. We got it. The sellers, they hit a lot of stuff behind the walls, and once we got into the walls, it's
Mm,
like, oh, we got to replace the electrical. And so
yeah.
it overrun by probably 11,000, somewhere in that range as
Mm,
well,
hmm.
$12,000. And so we just had to make calls. Okay, what is really critical to get done? Is there a space we can save, right? Is there a space that we can like trade off costs so that at the end of the day, we're still delivering a good product, and we're still able to meet our investor kind of expectations. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
definitely being transparent, I mean, number one. But hey, here are the things that we're going to employ to be able. So, for example, it was like, hey, these windows are great. I wanted to switch them out, but they're still dual pane. They're still, operating.
Yes.
The color is a little bit, it's white versus off white. Can we live with that? Sure,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
So it's just those little trade-offs where, maybe going out and contracting and saying, hey, how can we get our insurance numbers down? How do you do that in the properties that you have to just kind of make those trade-offs, to be able to still kind of, you're taking risks, right? And you're balancing this risk management of, hey, we want to get our investors' returns. We know things happen. How do you manage through some of that? What are some of the calls you're
Yeah, that is, yeah, yeah. You just said the operative word, trade-offs, or maybe that's two words with a hyphen in between, but trade-offs. It's a lot of all about trade-offs, because when we first go into the property, like closing day at, you now own the property and you're maximally responsible for that property as the general partner or a member of the GP team. You have maximum responsibility, and you also have, we used to say this in software development, at the beginning of the project, that's when you have the maximum level of ignorance about the project, right? you know, and now you can start looking. Now you get to see, oh, all right, now, like I mentioned the roofing example before, you tear off the roof and see there's a lot more there. Or you want to install this property that I just walked through a few minutes before we started this discussion. They're putting washers and dryers in the units. Well, when you put washers and dryers in the units, sometimes you discover things that you didn't expect. For example, does the plumbing system have sufficient capacity to, or the sewer? Will the sewer accommodate the sewage coming from the washer? Is there sufficient plumbing capacity? Is there sufficient electrical capacity? Now, hopefully you've evaluated that up front before you actually put your washers and dryers in the units. It's something I look at. Every deal that I look at now, I'm going to the electrical panel in every unit and I'm counting up the amperage that we have in the unit, because I want to know that we have sufficient amperage to support a washer and dryer. And it's interesting. I'm getting a little bit emotional. Do you get the impression that this is kind of fresh in my brain, like something, a recent experience in here? But we got to know that. And so when we're making those trade-offs, hopefully we have considered issues like sufficient amperage in the units, sufficient sewerage capacity, sufficient plumbing capacity before we put the washers and dryers into the units. And so we try to do that. That comes from with experience, and that also comes from partnering with other people who have experience,
definitely,
right? And
definitely.
so we hopefully have considered a whole lot of stuff up front, but then something wild happens that you weren't expecting. There's a deal that I'm in Tennessee, 100 unit plus property in Tennessee. We had a fire in April. And this is a garden style property. And one of the buildings, where there are multiple buildings there, each building has, 10 or 16 units or whatever. And one of the buildings burned down completely.
Oh,
So
wow.
you lose 10 units right there. When you lose all of those units, the good news, nobody was killed. There were no serious injuries and nobody was killed. There was like one sprained ankle with somebody trying to come out of the property. So praise God that there was no loss of life. That would have been heartbreaking right there, right?
Yes, it
Oh
would
my
have.
goodness. And you think about what the family would have gone through or whatever. It's bad enough that they're losing their possessions. That was terrible. But here's what I like about that. You talk about trade-offs. Trade-off that we had to make there is, I love that we had the professional management on site, because they were Johnny on the spot immediately on the day of the fire. Within hours, when they became aware of the fire, they had our people either in a vacant unit on our property or in a hotel nearby.
Wow.
So they were
Wow.
taking care of it. They were right on the spot. And the other thing is, my mentors on this deal, my mentors and fellow GPs on this deal, what's so remarkable is that the type of insurance that they made sure that we had on this property, I wasn't even thinking about this when we were working on the deal and raising capital and all this kind of insurance we had on there, also included business continuity insurance. And with business
Wow. Yeah.
continuity insurance, because we no longer had this one building, these 10 units or whatever, that no longer existed. They're no longer bringing in income for us. Well, our insurance is paying that income
That's
while we
that's
rebuild that building.
that's good. That's good. You
So
tapped on a lot of stuff. One, I believe, is when you're coming up with your business plan. Hey, we want to add washers and dryers. Be thinking about the other things that could be peeled back. Build it into your risk
yes,
management a little bit. Build it into your
yes,
numbers.
yes,
Some sort of percentage of, you know, error that, hey, these things could come up to some
yes,
degree. You're not going to be able to plan for it all.
yep.
That was one thing I heard. And number two, really being able to connect with the right partners to fill in the blanks for what you don't know, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
you don't know what you don't know, right? So
Yeah, you don't know. We don't know. We don't know.
yeah, yeah. But
Yes.
if I have the right partners that are somewhat complementary to me, that I know, hey, they know Tennessee better than I know Tennessee, or they know building structure. Like, I've looked at two markets, right? I look at Arizona, I've looked at Alabama, I've looked at multiple markets, but just
Mhm.
comparing Alabama to Arizona. Well, Alabama, the way they build is completely different to the way Arizona build. The things that I'm looking for in an Arizona building is different than the things that I'm going to be concerned about in a different state, because of just the way the building structure, the temperature, the climate, insurance numbers. I mean, all of that changes as you change different markets, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
being able to come alongside, whether they're mentors or partners that know that space, that you can kind of build that complementary kind of partnership with, I think is critical. So that's
Oh,
been good.
yes. Yes.
Follow up to that is, what do you believe are the two critical things that have been instrumental to your success in this space?
Relationships, number one. And your relationships, like what you said, mentors, partners, people who know things that you don't know. Relationships, number one, bar none. That is, it's through relationships, and you know this about me. I was in California for a few years before I moved here to Arizona. And I tried to do multifamily in California. Numbers just didn't work, and I could go into that in more depth. But when I got to Arizona, 4 months after I got here, I was in my first deal. I mean, we had
Wow.
closed the first deal, closed, not just in it, but closed, and that deal has worked out really well. And the reason it
Awesome.
worked out really well is because of the relationships, the mentoring, the partnerships, the the people who knew things that I didn't know, and that with that partnership, I ended up doing another deal with them, and we're about to do we're talking through, and we're preparing to do some other deals this month, as a matter of fact. So
Yeah.
really good relationships. That is, it's mind-blowing to me. That's something that I didn't know when I was in brokerage back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was doing that. I did not understand the value of relationships. I thought it was good enough to just be be able to figure things out, to be able to solve the puzzle, to solve the spreadsheet, to do the numbers and all of this stuff. I did not understand when I was in, back in my, mid 20s, how valuable business relationships really are.
For sure. For
It
sure.
makes all the difference in the world.
All the difference in the world. No matter how smart you are, like, relationships will take you so much further. I've
Yes,
learned that the
yes,
hard way too, because
yes, yes,
I grew up kind of in a household that's like, work hard. If you work hard, you'll get it, right? Like,
yes,
you'll
yeah,
succeed. And it's like, to a certain extent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that that's a Caribbean background, right? That's
Yeah,
for
for
me,
sure.
Barbados, yours Jamaican, Caribbean background. That's because we both have people in our families where we watch them as entrepreneurs, and they worked really, really hard, and that was the model that we saw and that we learned from. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I'd say number one is relationships. I'd say the second thing would be specialized knowledge. But really, I keep getting back to relationships, because it's through the relationships that you develop that specialized knowledge. You can develop some specialized knowledge by going through books and videos and all the training materials and whatever mentorship program you're in or whatever, or just on your own, just going to the library and getting the books. You get some specialized knowledge there. But
So,
I
so
think
when you say specialized knowledge, you mean niching or knowing something that other people don't know, knowing it so well? What do you kind of mean by
yeah,
that?
all of those. Let me give you some examples. Specialized knowledge in underwriting, for example. And for those, I don't know if, how much of your audience is multifamily or just in general business or maybe in other areas. But as Tari knows, underwriting is it's answering one question: how do I take this piece of real estate and turn it into a business that makes money? And we
Yep.
do that with an electronic spreadsheet, but really underwriting is answering that one question. Could be specialized knowledge in underwriting, could be specialized knowledge in renovations or roof repairs or electrical or plumbing. And here's the thing, if you have the right relationships, you get that specialized knowledge as part of your team. So relationships are an accelerant to specialized knowledge, because that
For
specialized
sure.
knowledge doesn't have to be yours. You know how they say it takes money to make money, but the money it takes doesn't necessarily have to be yours, right?
Yeah,
You could be,
exactly.
leverage investors, right? Well, I think it takes specialized knowledge to make money, but the specialized knowledge it takes doesn't necessarily have to be yours if you're very good at building relationships and building
That's good.
teams. Because
That's
none of
good.
us knows all of it. None of us, my goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
feel,
And
I
this
can
and this is
feel
from an avid learner. Like you're I mean, whoo, I mean, you love to learn more than I do, and I don't love to learn as you like you're in every space you can pull knowledge, you're pulling knowledge. Like that's one thing I do notice about you. And so to be able to say that, like, yeah, even with that, you still, can't know it all. So
it's one of the things I admire about you too. I see that in you. I see how you absorb that all through your I didn't know you in corporate America, but you've told me stories about your corporate America adventures, and now I'm getting to know you in real estate. Yeah, it's the same thing. We have to do that. We are continuous students always. Yeah.
So, from the capital raising standpoint, because I know that's kind of where you focus, that's kind of your specialty or your niche.
Yes.
What would you say is critical from all the things you've learned kind of in your space today in today's market? What are the things that people really need to do to be able to capital raise in today's market?
Number one, dig the well before you're thirsty. Have a way to reach out to people who are prospective investors before you need money from them, so that they understand what you're doing, so that they see some of your successes, so that they see some of your failures too. And here's why it's critical to share failures: because you want to share how you worked through the failure. No investor expects you to be 100% successful all the time. It's like sports, you play basketball. Yeah, that's right. Remember,
Right.
yeah, you basketball player, right? Okay, that's right. Yeah. And then basketball, baseball, football, whatever, any sport. I'm a swimmer. My sports are swimming and martial arts, but none of us are 100% successful in any sport. And we accept that in sports. And a savvy investor understands that the deals that they're investing in are not going to be 100% successful all the time. What they need to know, though, is that when you hit a hiccup or an obstacle or a wall or a barrier or something that does not go right, what steps are you taking to deal with that? Do you
Yeah.
confront it head on? Do you go over it, under it, around it, or through it? That's something my dad drilled into my brother and me when we were growing up. My parents did, my mom and dad. When you face an obstacle, do you go over it, under it, around it, or through it? Or do you sit down and cry?
Right.
You know?
Right. So number one, dig the well, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That's a great
Share what
one.
number one, dig the well before you're thirsty. Share what you're doing. Like we do a podcast like you, we do a podcast, and we do a monthly newsletter, and we just stay in touch with people, and I give presentations at conferences. I'm going to be presenting at a conference next month in New York, and I do that either in person or via Zoom. All of those, you want to make sure that you're out there and that people know what you're doing. And I have a
Yeah.
mentor based in Florida who likes to say, anytime you're with someone and you're having a conversation, if you're having a conversation with someone else, they need to understand what it is you do
That's good.
and how you do it and how they
That's good.
might benefit from it,
And I
right?
think people avoid that, right? It's like, I don't want to really
Yes.
talk about what I do. But yeah,
Yes.
somehow, that's good.
And you don't want to
So
be like that
creating the
guy that's just
pipeline for you, go
oh,
ahead, sorry.
go ahead, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say creating the pipeline. How should people create the pipeline? I know you attend a lot of conferences, you're part of a lot of networks. But is it, hey, let's build on the relationships you already have? What would you say it would be crucial to just helping them learn how to build their pipeline?
That's a really interesting question because a lot of people say, hey, start with friends and family. Well, it wasn't until my third GP deal that I got friends and family, like friends pre-real estate who were investing in me. It's like they wanted
Yeah,
to see what I was doing. Part of it is they wanted to see what I was doing. And part of it is they're just busy. And then the people who knew me before commercial real estate or before syndication, I'll say syndication specifically, the people who knew me before then knew me as this tech guy, which I still am, as the tech company founder. And they're saying, oh, real estate, that just doesn't fit. That's like, do you go to a
you go to a
would you
Chinese
go to
restaurant
Home
for
Depot?
Mexican.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you go to a Chinese restaurant for Mexican food?
That's an excellent example. Right. Specialization. I was going to say, do you go to Home Depot for auto parts? But same
Right,
thing, right?
right,
Like, yeah. And so they kind of have to see what you're doing there and see the connection. So
for sure.
yeah, you're doing all of those because you never know when somebody's ready. And the other thing is, no matter how much money you raise, no matter how much money people promise you, no matter how much net worth they have or liquidity they have, there's some people who will not actually wire the funds. They'll make the promise and you say, hey, John, where's that wire you were sending? And then crickets. And you never know because, maybe John's running his business and John had a hiccup in his business, which prevents him from wiring the money now, because now with
Right.
that money that he was going to wire to your investment, he needs it to make sure that one of his companies survives or whatever. And that happens. That's just reality. So what I try to do is stay in touch with my investors well enough so that if they have a hiccup, they're comfortable mentioning it to me, because we all feel a little bit ashamed if we can't come through on something, right?
Understood.
And
Understood.
so I want to make sure they feel comfortable enough to give me the bad news early so that I can take action around it, right?
And is there anything you do to kind of like, hey, in general, when I'm raising, if people have committed, I may get 70% of that commitment. And so I'm always raising to like 110, or is there any tricks that you do to kind of,
Yeah, it's like you want to raise 130, 150%. Honestly, as much as you can, because you know what? What's the worst that can happen if you have too many soft commits and then all the hard commits come in? Then you have somebody who wanted to put money in your deal but couldn't. Guess who's going to be first in line in your next deal?
yeah, true that. That's good.
So I would rather. Who is it who said this? I'm trying to remember. I would rather sprint past the finish line than just trot past or just
Yeah,
walk past. I want to
yeah,
sprint past the finish line,
that's
and
good.
that's where we are, and we're fortunate that nothing goes 100%, but we're fortunate that that's the direction we're headed in. And there's people that I talked to. I had one guy who was at a conference, and after a break, he yelled out to me, "Hey, Ray, that deal you presented yesterday," and there were a bunch of people around. He says, "I'm going to put $3.5 million in that deal." I said, "Oh, good." Hey, Tari, I'm still waiting on that wire. But it's funny.
Gotta
But
love
then
it.
you get some people who really committed. We have a lot of people who put in 100,000, 500,000, whatever. People who make commitments and keep their commitments. Most of the people that we work with keep their commitments, but some of them, they mean well, but sometimes they're just believing their own BS, right? So
Yeah, yeah, understood,
yeah.
understood. Well, we've already learned a lot of lessons. The show's called Lessons into Blessings. So, and the purpose for that is that people, things happen. So we want to, the people who do best is when they've taken the lessons, they've taken the mistakes and the setbacks along the way of their lives, and being able to pivot and turn it into a blessing, or find the been able to make lemonades out of lemon, right? So
Lemonade, yes.
we always end with this question in some way, shape, or form. But is there one lesson in your life that you've been able to take and it is serving you as a blessing now because you've been able to pivot it, learn from it, glean from it, and it serves to help fuel you now?
I will isolate that lesson in the blessing to just the syndication business, and within the past few years, within the past few years of when I've been capital raising in the syndication business. So just to isolate, because there's so many. Honestly, there are
I
many,
know.
many,
Trust me,
many.
I get that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it pours out. The big one is, and I'll focus on capital raising. It's never too early to start raising capital and start having conversations that could lead to raising capital. Because when
Yeah.
someone is going to put money into your deal, the classic thing they say, it's people who know, like, and trust you. Yeah, that's a factor. But in order to build all of those, they have to see you operating consistently over some length of time.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's never too early to start building that credibility.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
that's a big thing. Yeah, that would be the big lesson for me.
I think you had a two-part there. The second part of that is operating consistently over some length of time. Consistency,
Yes, yes,
critical, right?
yes, yes,
Because even when you think people aren't watching, they are watching.
yes,
And you think, you know, oh, they never respond to anything, but they see that consistency. And over time, and 2 years down the road, they're tapping you like, yeah, I've been watching you, and I'd like to kind of, parlay into something that you're doing. So I definitely believe the consistency,
yes,
and, it's never too early to start. But
yes.
showing those proof points, showing that track record, and consistently doing it, consistently showing up. So
Hmm.
that's really good. You didn't even know you dropped that point.
I didn't know. See, that's why I talk to you, Tara. You can straighten me out. What am I talking about, Tara? Straighten me out. Translate what I'm saying for me. Oh,
Oh, well,
wow.
that's awesome. It's always good talking to you, Ray. How
Yes,
can
thank
our
you.
audience find out more? You got your information in the background,
Yeah,
so
yeah, right there. ROI Clear is our podcast. You can go to roiclear.com, or if you go to rayhightower.com, you get everything that I'm connected to. And the cool thing is, every one of our sites, every one of our entities has links to all the other entities. So,
that's cool.
and
That's
I
cool.
make myself accessible, and especially if you hear about me through Tari's good people. So you got instant credibility. If you're listening to
Right,
Tari's podcast, you got
right. So they
credibility.
get discounts. They get discounts. I'm just
I'm sorry. What did you say? I can't. This is something happened.
oh
Something just dropped out.
my Wi-Fi connection's not good.
Wi-Fi just choked up.
That's hilarious. Well, I just want to thank our listeners for joining us for another episode of Lessons into Blessings. Until next time, stay blessed.
Yes. Thank you.